So it was 2012, and every year the Charter School Growth Fund brings together all of our portfolio CEOs for a time to learn and share from each other. And it's a very, very powerful time. And it just so happened that this meeting was in Seattle, and I had taken a break from the meeting and the bathrooms were upstairs, and I walked upstairs to the bathroom. And as I came out of the bathroom, I looked down, and the way the bathrooms were in a balcony, you could kind of look down on the whole floor. And I noticed that the group of people down below who represented our portfolios were very different from the 90% of the students in our portfolio who are students of color, predominantly African American and Latino. The leadership was almost opposite of that, down on the floor. And I said to myself, this is an issue that I think we can attack at the Charter School Growth Fund, because we know that there are high quality leaders of color out there who are leading schools that are producing phenomenal student results just as much as the schools that were represented by the leaders there. All of the leaders there are doing tremendous things for kids, for families, for communities, but we knew there were more out there that we had not tapped, and we needed a vehicle to tap into them. And so from there, we talked amongst our team at the Growth Fund with our CEO, Kevin Hall, and then ultimately connected with philanthropic support through the Walton Family Foundation. And we launched in the winter of 2013 really, our Emerging CMO Fund. And the goals of the fund were to identify great entrepreneurs of color who are leading high-performing schools and are looking to scale their schools. Yeah, some of the first ones we funded were, we had an first-year fund class in June of 2014 of 5 schools that were all tremendous. We had Dr. Charlene Reed, who's leading the Bronx Charter School of Excellence. We had Malka Borejo, who's leading Equitas Community Schools in Los Angeles. We had Frances Tesso, who was leading Voices Academy in San Jose, California. We had Margaret Fortune, who was leading Fortune Charter Schools in Sacramento. And we had Chantel Wright, who was leading Achievement Prep in Washington, D.C. All of these schools were led by, in this case, powerful women of color, and we're all achieving results similar to some of the other organizations we funded. The only difference between their leadership and what was happening for them in the schools that we funded is they didn't yet have a vision for growth to a bigger network of schools. What they all knew was that they were leading a great school or a couple of great schools, and they wanted to add 1 or 2 more. And so the purpose of our fund is not to grow each of these entities to 10 school entities, although I think some of them will go that path. It's really to say you're running a great school or a great couple of schools. How can we help you be better resourced to open your next great school or your next great couple of schools? And if doing that in a better resource environment leads you to wanting to do more of that, then you can join our National Charter School Growth Fund. These are all phenomenal schools doing phenomenal work for kids, but I'll tell you the story of the first time I went to visit Frances Tesso at Voices Academy in San Jose, California. We looked at all the data before we went out there, and so we saw that it was an extremely high-performing school, and so we knew that walking in. But I don't think I was fully prepared for what I experienced when I walked through the door. Voices is a very special place. It is a dual language immersion school. So this is a school that is taking a predominantly Spanish-speaking population, and when they come to them in kindergarten and in first grade, their instruction is 80–90% in Spanish and a little bit in English, and they move that bar over time to where they get to about 50-50 by 3rd grade, and then they continue that 50-50 through 8th grade. So what I was able to see were students who were completely comfortable switching their language and performing at high levels And it wasn't just we're going to do our academic subjects, math, reading, English, in English, and we're going to do the extras in Spanish. They were flipping all subjects. So they would have some chunk of their math for the year in English and some chunk of their math for the year in Spanish. And one of the very special things I saw was, as I said, most of the students there are predominantly Spanish speaking, but there are some English speaking students who enroll there from day one. So you see this interesting phenomenon where in the early grades, you'll see predominantly Spanish-speaking students helping and tutoring the students who are native English speakers as they struggle to acquire the Spanish language in the morning. And then in the afternoon, it flips. And the native English-speaking students are helping the students who are native Spanish speakers with the instruction that's in English. And this was one of the first times where I had seen students at that age as both the quote-unquote expert who's bringing to his or her peers, and also the student who's learning from his or her peers, and maybe the student struggling. The Bronx Charter School of Excellence is run by Dr. Charlene Reed in the Bronx, and the tremendous thing when you go there is the school is a fully integrated part of the community. So I happened to walk, they have their school in one building, and then they had a couple of office spaces in a building down the street. And as I walked down the street with Charlene, there was not a person who passed that did not know her and did not speak. And that was whether they were the people who were working on the street doing the construction, they were the small business owners that she frequents, they were some kids who were older than her kids, maybe looked like they should have been in school but weren't, right? But there was a mutual respect between her and all of the members of the community who really felt like this is our school. This is our school where we're sending our kids, and it's led by one of us, right? And that was just very special and deep, and not something that you see in every school that you walk into. We now have 14 schools that we've added over a 3-year period. We just recently added 5 more organizations to our portfolio. Last year, we added Dr. Emilio Pack in his school, STEM College Prep in Los Angeles. And one of the really phenomenal things about this school is it was a high school, and then they merged with a middle school, so now it's a middle high school. But it's taught entirely with an inquiry-based approach. And so it's really about students solving problems and building the skills that they're going to need in order to be successful as science and engineering majors. And this is spoken as a former electrical engineering major, so much pride there. But it was really good to see. I stepped into, I'll never forget, I think it was a remedial algebra class. And too many times when you step into a remedial class, it's just kind of rote learning. And you really wonder, is this the right way to remediate for the kids? What was so wonderful about that class is they were clearly in the midst of a multi-day problem that the teacher had put on the board, and the kids were separated into 3 groups of 4, and the teacher said, I'm going to give you 3 days to struggle with and solve this problem. And she was walking around and coaching them, and one group there were 2 of the kids arguing because they had a different kind of hypothesis on what the right answer is and the way to get there. You saw other groups kind of struggling through it together, but you could really tell that the students were learning. And so I think his inquiry-based approach is very special in what they do there. Eric Sanchez, he runs a school called Henderson Collegiate in rural Henderson, North Carolina. So I think oftentimes in this work, we focus very much on schools that are opening in the big urban areas, and the issue of education is going on in the urban areas of this country, but there's just as much struggle and need in the rural areas of this country. And Eric got training at a rural school in KIPP, but saw a need in the Henderson community in North Carolina. So you go to this community, and it still has remnants of a lot of the things that were deeply problematic in the South years and years and years ago. There's still remnants of those there. And so you see a school system that provides a different education depending on who the student is. And when I walk into Eric's schools, which are predominantly African American kids, there's a handful of Latino kids, but they're all kids of color, and they're learning at levels that have them in, I can't remember, it's the top 5% or top 1% of all schools in the state of North Carolina. And so he and his team are incredibly dedicated, but they're proving that with high quality education, all kids can achieve regardless of the background that you're coming from. And I think having those proof points in rural communities is an important part of the work that we need to embrace. I think there's been a lot of conversation about the need for our work to reflect leadership of the communities that we serve. And I absolutely think that that is an incredibly important thing, and will frankly not allow us to go as far as we would like until we recognize and embrace that. But I do want to be clear that when we started this fund, the hypothesis was around leaders of color who led schools with students who reflected that background. But it was not because we just wanted to go out and create these leaders. It was an acknowledgement that they're out there and doing this hard work today, and for whatever reason, our systems of sourcing have not found them in the way that we found others. So let's create a system of sourcing that's just going to recognize and acknowledge these leaders who are doing great things for their kids, and provide them with the opportunity to serve more students in those schools and in those organizations that they've already built.